Tonight at 10, fiery exchanges in the House of Commons as MPs debate how their own standards of conduct should be enforced. The government attempted to change the system last week after former Tory MP Owen Paterson broke lobbying rules. Today, the Labour leader accused the Prime Minister of running scared.
He does not even have the decency to come here either to defend what he did or to apologise for his action.
I would like first and foremost to express my regret and that of my ministerial colleagues over the mistake made last week.
Also on the programme tonight, the former US President Barack Obama tells the COP26 summit the world isn't doing anywhere near enough to fight climate change and urges young people to stay angry. Poland pushes back thousands of migrants trying to cross the border from Belarus. A man who was injured and stuck in a cave in the Brecon Beacons for more than 2 days has tonight been rescued. And reunited at last, the United States reopens its borders for the first time in 600 days to double-vaccinated travellers.
And coming up in sport on the BBC News Channel, the man to rescue Newcastle's season. Eddie Howe, seen alongside co-owner Amanda Staveley here, is appointed the club's new head coach.
Good evening. The Prime Minister has refused to apologise over the government's attempt to change the rules governing how MPs' standards of conduct should be enforced. The move that caused outrage among opposition parties and many Tory MPs was prompted by an investigation into lobbying by the former Conservative MP Owen Paterson. Today, in a heated debate in the House of Commons, Labour accused the government of giving a green light to corruption and accused the Prime Minister, who wasn't at the debate, of running scared. Our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, reports.
What really lurks underneath? Is it always clear to see? For politicians, for Parliament, what's right and wrong? A senior Tory quit last week after breaking the rules. His party caused outrage when it tried to save him. But is the Prime Minister ready to reflect or to show regret?
To be clear, Prime Minister, you're not going to apologise for the way you acted last week?
Look, I think it's very important that we get this right, and we are going to make every effort to get it right, and we are going to hold MPs to account. What I think is also, and MPs, as I said last week, should not break the rules.
It's been a sombre moment. The Tories were accused of trying to rig the rules for one of their own, and the Speaker used today to warn it must never happen again.
What I don't want is another dark week like last week. I want to make sure the public have faith in parliamentarians and faith in the House of Commons.
MPs are not allowed to talk directly to the government for firms that are paying them wages. Owen Paterson was found to have broken that rule, and that's why this is all blown up. But they are allowed to do work on top of the day job of being a constituency MP. Even being a government minister is technically a second job. But they must publish anything extra that they earn over £100 in a register. And there's huge variation in the things they do, from shifts in A&E to offering legal advice to more commonly writing articles for the papers. But only a few dozen out of more than 600 MPs are earning extra enormous amounts in the tens of thousands of pounds.
But many Tories are worried about the perception. The Prime Minister may not have made time to turn up or wanted to say sorry, but
I would like first and foremost to express my regret and that of my ministerial colleagues over the mistake made last week.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yet Boris Johnson's no-show give the opposition another reason to keep on pushing.
Instead of clearing up his mess, he's left his side knee-deep in it. Instead of leading from the front, he's cowered away. He is not a serious leader, and the joke isn't funny anymore.
The SNPs even complained to the police about claims of cash for honours.
I have now asked the Metropolitan Police to investigate the activities of the Conservative Party and the awarding of places in the House of Lords.
And watch how the Prime Minister's colleagues blamed for the mess over Owen Paterson's squirm. The former Tory Chief Whip called for an apology.
Politics, Mr. Speaker, is a team game, but if the team captain gets it wrong, then I think he should come and apologise to the public and to this House. That's the right thing to do in terms of demonstrating leadership.
And it's given new Tory MPs a taste for rebelling, even if they're full of regret.
Breaking the whip is not a straightforward thing to do. It churns you up beforehand and it leaves you a little shell-shocked afterwards. Perhaps next time it will be easier.
Boris Johnson might have got back to London too late for the start of the debate, but he can't pretend the conversation about money and politics isn't taking place.
And Sophie, even after all of that, we aren't any clearer tonight if MPs are going to agree that the rules have to be tightened up. And even if they can get to that kind of consensus, how would that even happen? And this conversation, even though Boris Johnson wants to stay out of it, is certainly grisly for the government. The opposition aren't going to give up pressing on this because they sniff the opportunity to embarrass him. And for Downing Street, they know too this is in part a mess of its own making. And plenty of the frustration being lobbed their way is coming privately and in public tonight from those on their own side.
Laura Kunsberg in Westminster, thank you. The former US President Barack Obama says the world has to step up now to tackle climate change before it's too late. Speaking at the COP26 summit in Glasgow, he said wealthy countries need to work with island nations. Our science editor David Shookman reports.
Deeper floods, bigger fires, higher temperatures. Climate change is being felt around the world. So the talks in Glasgow are not just about the future, they're about coping with a hotter and more hostile planet right now. Pushing for an urgent response is the former US President Barack Obama. Getting a rock star reception here and saying it's not too late.
Our planet has been wounded by our actions. Those wounds won't be healed today or tomorrow or the next, but they can be healed.
And addressing young activists, he appealed to them to keep up the pressure for change.
The most important energy in this movement is coming from young people. They have more stake in this fight than anybody else. You are right to be frustrated. Folks in my generation have not done enough to deal with a potentially cataclysmic problem that you now stand to inherit.
Many young people have suffered cataclysm already. A typhoon in the Philippines 8 years ago claimed 6,000 lives, and one survivor, the daughter of a fisherman, fears more violent weather to come.
I have seen death myself. I have seen my family struggle. I still have so many dreams in this lifetime. I'm just 24 years old. I still want to have my family. I still want to have children, but I don't even know if they will have the good future ahead of them.
And with emotions running so high, activists here say even Mr. Obama has broken a promise to get climate aid to the poorest countries.
But we don't want to talk to him. What we need is action. He already knows what we want. He already knows what the people want, and that is the $100 billion pledge that he pledged in 2009 in Copenhagen.
More and more people are enduring the kind of extremes that scientists have long warned about as the planet heats up. So this is a chance to prevent a bad situation from getting worse. And tomorrow we get a really crucial assessment of where we're heading with global warming after all the promises made by global leaders. And I suspect on the basis of other estimates in recent days, it'll say the promises are great, but it's delivery that counts, and the policies to make that happen aren't yet in place. And at the same time, to underline the importance of this whole process, we're going to get some new Met Office projections of global warming and what they mean for us.
David Shookman, thank you. The new head of Yorkshire County Cricket Club has apologised to the former captain Azim Rafiq after his experiences of racism at the club. Lord Patel said the club's investigation into Mr Rafiq's allegations, after which no one was disciplined, had been badly handled. Our sports editor Dan Rowan reports.
Headingley has witnessed some of the greatest revivals in the history of English cricket, but leading Yorkshire out of an unprecedented crisis could surpass them all. And today the club's newly installed chairman vowed lessons would be learned.
After 158 years, we're ready to change. We're ready to accept the past, and we're ready to become a club which people can trust to do the right thing.
A report found former player Azim Rafiq was a victim of racial harassment and bullying at Yorkshire, but the club took no action against anyone, sparking outrage. Today it settled a separate employment tribunal with the spinner, with no gagging order imposed.
I thank Azim Rafiq for his bravery in speaking out. Azim is a whistleblower and should be praised as such, and he should never have been put through this. And I'd like to apologise to him. What happened to you must never happen again.
Yorkshire are setting up an independent whistleblowing hotline for other victims of discrimination to come forward, and after criticism over a lack of transparency, have also released the report to those with a legal interest in it.
Have you had a chance to look through the full report, and if so, what did you think of what you found in it?
What I've seen so far does make me feel uncomfortable. You know, that's what it needs, seismic change.
Today in a statement, Rafiq said, "I spoke out because I wanted to create change at the club. I brought a legal claim because the club refused to acknowledge the problem and create change. This is a good start, but I want to reiterate my call for the change that must come next, and one that must happen quickly." In the latest allegation to hit the club, a former Yorkshire Academy player has told the BBC that when 16 he was subjected to racist language by a member of staff.
He came marching into the room and he looked into my eyes, and he said that was a typical shot, wasn't it? And he just left. I was left stunned. I didn't know how to react. It was the first time I'd ever been racially insulted directly to my face.
In a statement, Yorkshire said it's essential that those who have experienced racism, discrimination and abuse are able to come forward to share their experiences. We were unaware of this allegation until now, but will investigate accordingly. Having become engulfed by a crisis that has rocked the cricketing world, Yorkshire will be desperately hoping that this marks the first day in the road to recovery. But with more damaging revelations set to come, regaining trust along with sponsors and the right to host international matches here will be no easy task. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Headingley.
A 10-year-old boy has died after a dog attack near Caerphilly in South Wales. Gwent police said they were called to an address at around 4 o'clock this afternoon and confirmed that the child had died at the scene. The dog was shot by firearms officers. The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were more than 32,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means, on average, there were 34,255 new cases reported per day in the last week. 57 deaths were recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average, in the past week, 170 related deaths were recorded every day. Numbers are often lower on a Monday. And just over 10.3 million people have received their booster jab. Poland has accused Belarus of trying to trigger a major incident on the border between the two countries by encouraging migrants to try to force their way across. The Polish government says there are currently between 3,000 and 4,000 people at the border, with thousands more ready to follow them. 12,000 Polish troops have been deployed along the razor wire fence of the border. The European Union says Belarus is seeking revenge for Western sanctions. Our Europe correspondent Nick Beak has more.
Rush hour this morning in western Belarus, and they were only heading one way, towards the European Union. Accused of directing this surge of human traffic, President Lukashenko's regime, which has welcomed in thousands of migrants from around the world and is now pointing the way to the border with Poland. But at that border, this was the welcoming committee. If the sight and might of a Polish military helicopter was intended to turn them back, it didn't work. Neither did the tear gas. and soon they were trying to prise their way through to their goal, EU soil. The Polish authorities, themselves accused of pushing migrants back over the border illegally in recent months, released this video to show what they're dealing with. This crisis has been brewing for months. 6 weeks ago, we found these men who'd been trapped in the forest between Belarus and Poland.
We are playing us like a football. The Belarus will beat us, push us to Poland. The Poland will catch us, beat us, push us back to Belarus.
You will face criminal charges.
Today's mass attempt to cross into the EU here is the biggest so far and is more reminiscent of the scenes on the Greek-Macedonian border during the Syrian migrant crisis more than 5 years ago. President Lukashenko, who has enjoyed Russia's support, claims all this is the EU's fault. But the European Union says he's weaponizing migrants in retaliation for sanctions. And tonight, it's thought more than 3,000 are stranded on the border as the temperature falls below zero.
What has also been plummeting in recent weeks has been the relationship between the Polish government here in Warsaw and the rest of the European Union. But tonight the EU has expressed its full solidarity with Poland. Yet Poland is keeping in place this state of emergency in the border area, effectively banning aid agencies and journalists. So tonight, Sophie, there are lots of human rights groups who are very concerned about the level of force and the tactics that may be used in the name of protecting the EU's borders.
Nick Beek in Poland, thank you. Millions of people in Afghanistan are facing starvation in what's fast becoming the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. That's the warning from the United Nations. The head of the World Food Programme says the country faces being turned into hell on earth following drought and the withdrawal of US and allied troops. Our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, reports.
Winter's coming, and it looks like being a bad one. The camels are on the move to warmer areas. We're heading west out of Kabul through the Taliban roadblocks. It's not long before we reach the snow. In Jalrez district, food aid is being distributed, flour to make bread. Everyone here knows that things are likely to get really bad in a few weeks. There's a real possibility we'll be frozen this winter, this man tells me. These people are so poor they can't afford to buy food or fuel for heating. A humanitarian disaster could bring the Taliban down, so they're cooperating with the international aid agencies even if they don't like them. The head of the World Food Programme, visiting Kabul, doesn't mince his words.
The winter months are coming. We're coming out of a drought. The next 6 months are going to be catastrophic. It is going to be hell on earth.
We reach Bamiyan, an agricultural centre which has been hit by drought, like many other parts of Afghanistan. And of course, there was an infamous Taliban crime here. A couple of 100 yards along the cliff from the place where the statues of the Buddhas used to stand, until the Taliban destroyed them, a woman called Fatima lives. She's a widow, raising her 7 friendly, intelligent children on her own. Before the Taliban took over, she got by with occasional food aid and the money she and her eldest boy earned from weeding the fields and herding sheep. But the drought has put an end to all that, and food aid doesn't reach here. Within weeks, they could all be starving. Some women sell their daughters for marriage, I say. Would she? If it was absolutely necessary to keep everyone alive, she answers, but she'd hate it. Listening to all this, it was hard not to think of your own family.
Imagine if this was your little girl, or your little boy, or your grandchild about to starve to death. You would do everything you possibly could. And when there's $400 trillion worth of wealth on the earth today, shame on us that we let any child die from hunger.
Fatima's children leave for school, those who are allowed to go. Like millions in this country, their lives are under real threat. The next few months will decide. John Simpson, BBC News, Bamiyan.
An injured man who was trapped in a cave in the Brecon Beacons for more than 2 days has tonight finally been rescued. He fell whilst exploring the extensive underground system on Saturday. Our Wales correspondent Hal Griffith is at the scene for us now. Hal.
Yes, the 37-mile cave complex underneath my feet here is one of the most beautiful but difficult in Britain. So when news came on Saturday lunchtime that someone had fallen and was trapped, volunteers started travelling from across the UK. Late tonight, after darkness had fallen, came the news that all their hard work had finally paid off. Mission accomplished. After more than 2 days of painstaking, exhausting work, relief all round. Together, these volunteers carried the casualty through an underground assault course of boulders, streams and ledges, the longest stretcher carry ever by a British cave rescue team.
It is absolutely amazing. The cooperation, the professionalism, everybody dealt with it. The controllers down to the grunts on the sharp end, it was just amazing. It's the biggest rescue any of us have ever done. I hope we'll ever do.
The casualty is an experienced caver in his 40s. On Saturday he fell and suffered multiple injuries, but could talk to his rescuers throughout.
If you consider how long he's been in the cave, how long he's been in a stretcher, he's doing very well indeed. So he's been talking to the medics along the way and they've been having a conversation, but we're waiting for them to come out now.
This is what draws enthusiasts here, a sculpted subterranean world in places almost 300 metres deep. It attracts cavers from across the UK. After 50 hours underground and the efforts of 250 volunteers, the casualty is now safe and on their way to hospital, bringing this rescue operation to a successful conclusion. For the volunteers, days of endeavour and years of training have tonight brought their reward. Howell Griffith, BBC News at the Fun on the Cave.
More than 250 people, mostly women, have applied to give evidence to a parliamentary inquiry into historical forced adoptions. The inquiry will examine why thousands of pregnant, unmarried women were pressured into giving up their babies in post-war years. Duncan Kennedy reports.
It haunts you. It's like a death, really.
This is Joan's story.
I wanted to keep him. It was cut and dried. You know, there was no way they were going to let me keep him.
Joan became pregnant in 1961.
And that's me there.
But she wasn't married.
I was on holiday with you.
And says she was pressured into giving up her baby for adoption by everyone from social workers to matrons. She still remembers the humiliation as she handed over her newborn son.
He was taken into matron's office and then they told me to go back into the nursery and take the bedding out of his cot and get it ready for the next child the next baby that was going to come along. And matron just said, oh, she's only crying because they're taking a baby away today. And I think that was really cruel, really, really cruel. And it's something I've never got over. Never will.
It's a wrench to part from your baby, but this mother has decided it would be better off with parents who can give it all.
It's now believed hundreds of thousands of unmarried women like Joan were forced to give up their babies in the 3 decades after the Second World War.
It was 1959 and I was 20 years old and I lived at home with Mum and Dad.
Margaret Souter says she was also coerced and still remembers the day she tried to block the door to the social worker who'd come to take her baby for adoption.
I pushed the door so that she couldn't get in and she said, you know, don't be stupid, this is what has to happen. You know, it's going to a proper family.
Are you saying that you physically tried to stop the door being opened by the social worker?
Yeah. Well, I pushed the door and I said, oh no. And she said, you know, you knew this had to happen. Come on, don't make so much fuss. It's all over now.
The BBC has now heard many similar stories, and more than 250 witnesses have contacted the Parliamentary Committee on Human Rights ahead of its inquiry into forced adoptions. You've never been able to have a reunion with your son in 60 years. Has there ever been a day where you haven't thought of your son?
No. There never will be.
I mean, now when I think about anybody taking a baby from me, I think I would kill them first. So why didn't I react more? I feel guilty that I didn't stop it happening. And I just feel like saying to people when I see them with babies, and I'm not, do you realise how lucky you are? That you've got that baby, and there's nobody going to come along and take it from you.
Margaret Souter, ending that report by Duncan Kennedy. Now, after 600 days, the United States has finally reopened its borders to much of the world's population, as long as they are fully vaccinated. British travellers have been among the thousands who've boarded planes and headed across the Atlantic to be reunited with family and friends. From New York, here's Neda Tawfik.
That first embrace, that flood of relief, none of them could have predicted they'd spend such a long time apart. The international arrivals floor of New York's Kennedy Airport sprang to life with heart-wrenching transatlantic reunions as passengers deplaned the first flights from London Heathrow and ran into the arms of loved ones.
It's the best thing ever in the whole world. It's been so emotional, and it has for millions of families all over the world, but this is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Sisters Jill and Louise haven't seen each other in 2 years.
Thank you so much.
What are you guys going to do now?
Just keep hugging each other.
It's not being able to touch my sister and them not hugging my children is been the hardest part of it all.
So many, like the Matthews, have missed out on precious moments they can never get back.
So, I mean, they've missed the birth of my son, so he's 3.5 months now, so finally they get to meet him. And they haven't seen him since he was crawling, and now he's a fully walking toddler with opinions, and so it's going to be really fun for them to spend all this time with him.
Airlines are hoping for many more scenes like this in the coming weeks. It's a major milestone for separated families, and it's a lifeline to the tourism industry right ahead of the winter holiday season.
There is a much more, I think, pragmatic framework in place, which is becoming more universal to allow travel to exist alongside the pandemic.
The ban was symbolically lifted with a dual takeoff between Virgin Atlantic and British Airways. Even with a watchful eye on COVID case rises in Europe, they're optimistic they can avoid any more turbulent family separations. Neda Tawfik, BBC News, New York.
And that's it from us. Have a very good night. Goodbye.